Letitia James, losing all kinds of key support. Letitia James, looking at an indictment. The grand jury subpoenas, they're flying. And what is she doing but fanning the flames of Donald Trump? So she's trying to make things more difficult for him. But I hate to tell her, you know what? The feds are going to win this thing all day long. The reason they're going to win, and the reason she's not a very good lawyer, frankly, is because of, well, this little thing called the Constitution. You know, that little thing that you're supposed to have studied, if you would, one Letitia James in law school, that law school that you went to, really not making anyone proud. Now, she's basically going after the locals. This is a breaking story coming to us courtesy of the New York Post that had the exclusive on this. Oswego, New York. Okay, the local officials there are like, whoa, because apparently Letitia does not want them engaging with federal law enforcement, engaging with ICE in any way, shape, or matter. If they do, oh, they're suddenly in trouble. I mean, what kind of breakdown is this? Again, they can't hit that subpoena fast enough for one Letitia James. The DOJ, I'm telling you, cannot move fast enough. Here we go. Here's the story. New York Attorney General Letitia James probing local cops for misconduct for working with Trump administration and with ICE. Excuse me? Excuse me. I mean, suddenly, what kind of twisted world do we live in? One in which Tish James is now going after local law enforcement because they're daring to work with the feds? Because they're daring to enforce the law of the land? Are you kidding me? I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it. But here is the New York Post, the story. Again, the headline, as we can confirm at this hour, New York Attorney General Letitia James probing local cops for misconduct for working with the Trump administration. So this is what's going to land her in a whole bunch of trouble. Okay, guys? She's basically saying, how dare you? This is a letter from the office of Letitia James asking the Oswego County Sheriff for details over any kind of cooperation that his office might be giving concerning the enforcement of federal immigration law. Okay, because for some reason in Letitia's warped mind, one, she's welcome to lie on a mortgage application while one Donald Trump can't. And two, the law enforcement in the state of New York is not supposed to work with the federal government in terms of helping in any kind of discovery of illegal migrants that are also criminals, because that is the craziness we have come to, all right? All communications between or among any member of the Sheriff's Office and any member of Homeland Security or its sub-agencies, including CBP and ICE at traffic stops, is also requested. She does not want them giving Donald Trump and his team squat. But let me tell you, this is what's going to take her down too. Okay, this is what's going to take her down. This is what Gavin Newsom just ran into out in California, where even the Ninth Circuit, and you know how liberal the Ninth Circuit is, had to say, you know what, we're going to allow this to stay. We're going to allow for the feds to come in and federalize the National Guard because you people clearly cannot get the job done. Kathy Hochul has a law in the books that restricts law enforcement from aiding in investigating, arresting, or deporting illegal migrants. So now Letitia's trying to enforce that. And in doing so, you know what's happening, ladies and gentlemen. She's setting up an entire war, a civil war between the state and the federal government, between New York and Donald Trump. And you know who's going to win that war all day long? I'm just going to give you a little preview. It's going to be the federal government. You know why it's going to be the federal government? Because of this little thing called the Constitution. And we can go through all the powers, the Supremacy Clause. We can go through the Commerce Clause. We can go through it all, the Naturalization Clause. Guess what? He's got the power, Tishy baby. You don't. Which is why she's flipping out and freaking out. We saw the latest sound, right? She sounds a little stressed, a little over the edge, right?
And you want me to sit in my seat and stand idly by and allow this craziness to happen? You can come after me if you want, but you elected me to stand up. You elected me to use the law. You elected me to go to court. You elected me to continue to challenge this administration. You elected me to stand up for the least of God's children. You elected me to continue fighting on. And I will fight on.
I'm sorry. What does one say to that? Fight, 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 fight. I mean, this woman is looking for something. She wants to create a fight. She does not want to actually help the federal government enforce the law. And you know what? The law is the law. I do recall a time, do you not? When the law was the law. Heck, even Obama, he had to enforce the law. He was deporting what? Some 1,000 migrants a day back in the day when actually the law was the law. Kind of makes you feel a little nostalgic now, doesn't it? Here's Barack Obama teaching Letitia James a thing or two.
Last time we spoke, you said that you weren't king, you were president. There were only certain things you could do unilaterally. As time goes on, 1,000 deportations on average a day. People are wondering, and our Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds, that's the question everybody asks. Won't you at least consider unilaterally freezing deportations for the parents of deferred action kids?
Yeah. Here's the problem that I have, Jose, and I've said this consistently. My job in the executive branch is supposed to be to carry out the laws that are passed. Congress has said, here's the law when it comes to those who are undocumented, and they allocate a whole bunch of money for enforcement. And what I have been able to do is to make a legal argument that I think is absolutely right, which is that given the resources we have, we can't do everything that Congress has asked us to do. What we can do is then carve out the DREAM Act folks, saying young people who have basically grown up here are Americans that we should welcome. We're not going to have them operate under a cloud, under a shadow. But if we start broadening that, then essentially I would be ignoring the law in a way that I think would be very difficult to defend legally. So that's not an option. And I do.
It's not an option. In other words, he couldn't defend it legally, but somehow fast forward a few years and suddenly Letitia James is going after any cop who dares to actually cooperate with local, federal law enforcement. So this is how you know she's going down. This is how you know she's going out with a bang, shall we say. Hostile takeover, Trump's new sweeping directive to ICE sends liberal cities quaking. This was the headline in Daily Mail. And believe me, they're getting heated, okay? And it's not just Letitia James, because they all want their moment in the sun, right? All these people out there running around trying to be the next mayor of New York. Oh, you got one candidate who's now getting himself arrested. Brad Landers, New York City mayoral candidate. I bet you never heard of him before. Well, suddenly he's a big name because he got to get arrested by ICE because he said, hey, do you have your warrant, et cetera? And ICE said, get out of our way because, hey, yeah, we do have our warrant. We wouldn't be arresting the guy if we didn't have the warrant. And you're now impeding law enforcement. You are in the way of us doing our jobs. And when you get in the way of us doing our jobs, guess what? It starts to get a little bit dangerous, and we don't really want that. And so the mayoral candidate, he's actually the city comptroller. He's in charge of the city's budget. So, he can't add because we're talking about New York City here, and they get tons of money, and yet somehow nobody can do any addition or subtraction because, the taxes keep going up and they keep coming out in the red. So here is Mr. Brad Landers getting arrested, I want to show you, by federal law enforcement here just moments ago in the could be great again, city of New York. Watch.
You don't have to. I'm not obstructing. I'm standing right here in the hallway. I asked to see the judicial warrant. By asking for a judicial warrant? You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens asking for a judicial warrant.
We go too. Sorry. Get away. I'm safe. Where are you taking him? Hello?
Hi, I'm the Comptroller's Press Secretary. Where are you taking the Comptroller of the City of New York?
Okay, so they're asking, where are you taking him? Again, federal authorities having just arrested him. I believe this video was posted by his wife. There is no, fisticuffs, so to speak, as we saw with Padilla the other day. But you can see there they've got him. And the idea was that he would be arrested because he was impeding law enforcement. And you know what? You can't actually impede law enforcement when they're trying to do their jobs. Didn't we just go through this? I mean, honestly, I feel like it's deja vu because, as I recall, we had to watch one LaMonica MacGyver out in New Jersey. You remember, right? LaMonica MacGyver, who got in all that trouble out in New Jersey and now is facing 17 years. 17 years in federal prison because she took it upon herself to actually be pushing the ICE agents. In this particular case, you don't see Lander doing that. So maybe he won't get 17 years, but you can't exactly get in the way of these federal officials doing their job, even if Letitia James thinks she can, okay? The law's the law, dare I say. Remember, Letitia? Forgive me. LaMonica. Sorry, one's in red, and they are of similar size. I don't think Letitia would do this, but, never say never. Fortunately, Brad did not find himself actually physically pushing up against federal agents, but she sure did. Unbelievable. Okay, so that's unbelievable. And now she's looking at 17 years for violating Title 18 U.S. Code Section 111A1 for assaulting, impeding, and interfering with law enforcement. So one would have to think they're going to get Brad Lander, the city comptroller of New York, once again on violating Title 18. Now, from what we can see, and again, we can go back to the video, there was no kind of assault. It was a peaceful transaction, if you would, but he kept saying, hey, how do you guys have a warrant to do this, etc. Maybe he's trying to put one AOC's recommendations and actions into words. So he finds himself now on the receiving end of the federal government making the decision that they are going to take him in. Again, the city comptroller of New York, in a rather unpleasant scene after demanding to see a judicial warrant for a man being arrested by immigration agents. He kept his hand, you'll notice, clutching the detainee's shoulder. And so this is once again part of why he was in the way.
You don't have to. I'm not obstructing. I'm standing right here in the hallway. I asked to see the judicial warrant. By asking for a judicial warrant? You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens asking for a judicial warrant.
We go too. Sorry. No way. I'm safe.
Whew. All right. So this is, so to speak, the federal showdown that some people like Letitia James have so desired. And you know what? It's coming to a head. But as I've told you before, she does not have a prayer in that case. Because again, thank you, Justin, for the generosity. Again, you've got somebody who is serving in direct defiance of the federal law. Because there is this thing called the Constitution, which apparently one Letitia James never studied, showing that, naturalization clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4. Remember this one, the Congress shall have the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. Okay, so if you have the power as Congress to establish a uniform rule of naturalization, and the law is such that it doesn't allow for people to be illegally here in the country, and it does allow for their arrest if they are here illegally in the country, and you have law enforcement going out and making those arrests, then I'm sorry, what exactly is this comptroller actually doing other than impeding law enforcement? And that is why we find ourselves in a situation where he is getting charged. I believe he'll be charged. We'll see what comes forward on all of this. But again, this didn't used to be hard back in the old days, right? We saw Obama. We saw Kristi Noem this week sounding a lot like Obama because she made the point. Hey, you know what? I'm here. I'm here to enforce the law of the land. And if you don't like the law of the land, then it's your job to go change these laws, because Naturalization Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 says the Congress shall have the power to establish a uniform rule of law, and it gives Congress the authority over citizenship, ladies and gentlemen, which is why no matter what they say, no matter how much the AOCs of the world carry on, no matter how much they threaten, they don't have a leg to stand on from a legal perspective.
Anyone's breaking the law in this situation, it's not members of Congress, it's the Department of Homeland Security. It's people like Tom Homan and Secretary Kristi Noem. You lay a finger on them, we are going to have a problem.
No, actually, I think you have a problem. I think you have a problem because I do believe In the case of La Monica, anyway, she was laying a finger on, well, more than a finger, maybe a stomach, on the ICE agents, all right? And then in the case of Mr. Lander here, who's trying to get his moment of fame because he wants to run for mayor of New York, he's actually finding himself up a creek without a paddle because, again, of that little darn thing called the Constitution of the United States of America. And so where do they get their power, their federal power over immigration? I mean, come on, if there's one single thing that the federal government can do, and believe me, I love giving lots of power. Justin, thank you so much again for the generosity. I love giving all the power in the world, if you would, to the states, because I believe in small government. Hey, I grew up in live free or die, New Hampshire, right? You know, we had a very small government. We actually balanced our budget. You know, imagine with no income tax and not even any sales tax. Amazing how that can happen, right? But anyway, you want a small government, but you also need to have the power to the federal government in cases when they actually need it for things like immigration, because you know what? It's a national security threat. You know what else? It's an economic threat. And we've been through it before. Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. Memorize this. The Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. And guess what? Immigration would count as something that's affecting foreign nations. So therefore, it counts as yet another reason why the Congress has all the power over this one. And if the executive branch is there to back up the Congress and enforce the law, then why do you have people like the comptroller of New York City? Why do you have people like Letitia James, the AG of New York City, getting in the way of that? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, necessary and proper clause. Very important. Okay? This gives the federal government the supremacy to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. It allows for Congress to pass immigration laws as needed and to enforce those enumerated powers like naturalization, like the Commerce Clause. I'm telling you, Letitia James does not stand a chance here. But then again, Letitia James is not exactly the brightest bulb in the room, now is she? Letitia James is the one who somehow thought she would go after one Donald Trump for mortgage fraud, when in fact, it's something that she herself was guilty of doing it. I love the comments that she made. When powerful people cheat to get better loans, it comes at the expense of honest and hardworking people. Everyday Americans cannot lie to a bank and get a mortgage to buy a home. And if they did, our government would throw the book at them. There simply cannot be different rules for different people. Now, Donald Trump is finally facing accountability for his lying, cheating, and staggering fraud, she said, because no matter how big, rich, or powerful you think you are, no one is above the law, including you, Tishy baby, because guess what William Pulte has discovered on you? And this is no joke. FHA director saying we got mortgage fraud. Listen to his allegation.
Recommended that the DOJ investigate New York Attorney General Letitia James over alleged mortgage fraud. The AG, Letitia James, has responded. We don't have the video, but here's the quote. "This investigation into me is nothing more than retribution. It's baseless. It has to do with the fact that on a power of attorney, I mistakenly indicated that I was a state of Virginia resident. And prior to that, I indicated to the mortgage broker that, in fact, in bold cap letters, that I am not a resident of Virginia and never will be. They just took the power of attorney and they're using that as a basis for enforcement of their investigation." Bill, do you know why she said she was a resident of Virginia on the power of attorney, if in fact she wasn't?
Well, I know that we are mortgage experts and we only refer things that we think are mortgage fraud, and we stand 100% behind the letter. I'll let the letter speak for itself. I do know, and I have seen some reports from that subject, from that subject's criminal defense lawyer saying certain things. I'll leave it to the DOJ to correct various things. But again, when we see mortgage fraud, we are going to report it. When we see mortgage fraud, we are going to prosecute it within the confines of our duties.
And in other words, we see mortgage fraud. In other words, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it's kind of a duck. Scott Cullen, thank you so much for your generosity. He says we're dealing with an unprecedented level of dumbness in this country. Yeah, well, when you got people like Letitia James who somehow think they're going to go after the former president of the United States, who was then running or expected to run for the presidency again, and fine him to the tune of $500 million. I mean, think about that. This is a really crazy amount of money, right? And then they're going to go after him, and they don't even have the ducks in a row, speaking of ducks, enough to know what their own skeletons in the closet might be, then yeah, you get a little bit of a problem. FHA loans involve federal funds and oversight. This is why it's so much worse, okay? So the subpoenas are going out. This is why it's so much worse for Letitia, because you actually have our taxpayer money that's involved. You're talking about federal dollars. She's willing to risk our federal dollars. At least Donald Trump was only willing to risk Deutsche Bank's. I mean, there's something for that, right? So in the case of Deutsche Bank and Donald Trump, it was up to Deutsche Bank to actually figure out what's what, right? Deutsche Bank was taking on the risk itself as a bank. And by the way, there was no victim. They got paid back in full. They said they'd do the deal again. Everybody made money. Everybody's happy. But in the case of Letitia, guess what? If she didn't pay the mortgage, well, that would be actually on the taxpayer dime. It wouldn't be on Deutsche Bank's time. It would be on federal taxpayers because she was getting a special federal loan. And she applied for this loan saying that this was going to be her main principal residence. I mean, I'm sorry, you're a lawyer. Don't blame your lawyer and the power of attorney. This is the house she's getting. You're going to sit blame somebody else? Oh, this is just nothing but a little teeny problem, just a mix-up. You heard what Bill Pulte said. He said, yeah, we've heard from them, and that's not actually what we think it is. They believe it to be at the FHA mortgage fraud. He also made the point of saying his position was not a political one. They're just calling it like they see it. So there was that little case. There was also the brownstone in Brooklyn that you guys know about, right? Where she's claiming that it was 4 levels instead of 5 levels because, again, she was able to get a certain sweetener, if you would, from the government. Oh, how do you like this? All this living off the government, right? Oh, and then there's this little beauty, 1983. Robert James and Letitia James, his wife, suddenly she's marrying her dad in order to get a break on this deal. This little number of a house. I'm telling you, these things, they add up to problems. Now, I want to point out these are all allegations, okay? So they got to prove it in court, but these grand jury subpoenas are going out as we speak. And if you listen to one Stephen Miller, she is up a creek without a paddle.
Letitia James says the allegations against her are nothing more than a revenge tour by the Trump administration. What's your response?
My response is that Letitia James is one of the most corrupt, shameless individuals ever to hold public office. She's guilty not only of those crimes, but of countless more crimes by using and abusing her public office to try to persecute an innocent man, depriving him of his rights, engaging in a conspiracy to obstruct our election, and to overthrow our democratic processes and procedures. She is guilty of multiple significant serial criminal violations.
Ooh. By the way, this is the original document. This is unbelievable. I mean, I look at this and I say, I hereby declare that I intend to occupy the property as my principal residence. I mean, why would you sign on to that? I get it. She's like, no, it's just a clerical thing, I'm not so sure about that. The president is not so sure about that. Not that it matters. The DOJ is not so sure about that. The grand jury is not so sure about that. Hence the grand jury subpoena is going out as we speak. And Stephen Miller's not so sure about that. And importantly, Bill Pulte from the FHA is not so sure about that. Oh, guess what else? Voters are not so sure about that because as all of this information sinks in, Letitia James is sinking in the polls. So she may play in New York City. I was going to say play in Peoria, but we're not talking about Peoria here. We're talking about New York City. So she may play a little bit in Manhattan. I'll give her that because you get a bunch of people there that hate Trump so much. They're suffering from massive TDS that she may actually have a leg to stand on there. But you go out into the rest of New York and look at that. She's struggling. I mean, they keep talking about Chuck Schumer struggling, but it's Letitia, baby, that's really struggling. I mean, look at the favorable versus the unfavorable. Look at those that don't know. So they're either not saying or they don't know. They want to see 33 and 27% there. So she's basically looking at 60-40, 60 being in the negative category. And you have this coming just as well. The media starts to turn on her. The media is getting sick of her because she wants $10 million in a slush fund that the Democrats set aside for her in order to cover her legal bills. A Siena College Research Institute poll found that while James has some favorable poll numbers, more so than Kathy Hochul, although I have a feeling that's going to change soon. Kathy Hochul's in the you-know-what as well. Her 33% favorable, unfavorable split is worse than anybody would expect for a Democrat Attorney General of New York. Yeah, well, part of it's because of her views on immigration. I mean, think about what we just saw there. in the city of New York, Brad Lander, comptroller, getting arrested by federal agents because he's trying to impede law enforcement. Think of how we began this show. As I told you, what Letitia's latest and greatest thing that she's got up her sleeve is to go after any cops that dare to cooperate with federal law enforcement. You're like, whoa, what's going on? I mean, especially when you get 79% of voters in New York State backing deported immigrants convicted of a crime, or 39% backing deported immigrants with no criminal record. I mean, it tells me you got some people there in the state of New York that are not exactly, all for the immigration thing. 59% say they do not want taxpayers paying for migrants' medical care. I mean, these are big numbers, okay, guys? These are big numbers. And so when Letitia comes out and says, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to arrest, or I'm going to demand the names of, or try to stand in the way of federal law enforcement doing their job, and I want all the names of the cops and anybody who's cooperating with them, I don't think that plays in the state of New York. And in some ways, it may not even play in the city of New York anymore. And so this is why, of course, you're seeing some of those poll numbers start to sink. And, she's got other challenges and problems. Cuomo apparently is someone that she's getting kind of nervous about, who may be the next mayor of New York. We'll see. The guy who is pretty, I think he's a self-defined socialist, right? And a Palestinian protester. That guy who, was up screaming all kinds of things at Tom Homan, really unpleasant video that we've seen together. He's the one that AOC is backing. He's the one that now Bernie Sanders is backing. Apparently Letitia likes him too. ABC, anybody but Cuomo and her book, because, they have a history. It kind of almost makes me like Cuomo, which I don't, right? So that tells you something. Scott Cullen, again, thank you for the generosity. Much appreciated. Trishy baby takes on Tishy baby. You know it. Anyway, this is just unbelievable to me, the whole thing. And I suspect she's going to be out as Attorney General for a variety of reasons. I mean, she should actually be in jail. Right? Because if they prove out these allegations, I think she should be in jail just because she was willing to corrupt her power. And it's something that came up in the appellate court as they make the decision there on what to do about the $500 million fine. One of the things the judges kept saying over and over again was, how is it that attorney generals like Letitia James could possibly see an expansion of their power to the private sector in this way? I mean, this kind of gives a lot of rope, if you would, to one attorney general, which is pretty darn scary. It's why Elise Stefanik is saying, hey, New York Bar Association, pay attention to this. It's why the legal group that used to be run by Stephen Miller, America First, is saying, hey, New York State Bar Association, would you pay attention to this? I mean, would you pay attention? One, because apparently she doesn't know how to fill out a mortgage application. She's either dumb or corrupt. Take your pick. I don't think either one look very good, all right? So she either lets somebody, another lawyer, fill it all out for her, and then just looks the other way when there are major glaring errors like, I'm going to live here full time while I'm Attorney General of New York, or she's really and truly corrupt. I suspect it's probably a combo deal, right? All right. Probably a combo deal. Anyway, her former colleagues can't stand her either. A lot of information lately saying how much they saw her as the kind that would abuse her power. I don't think any of that surprises us. None of that surprises us at all. But I would say this, you know what? They can't get her indictment fast enough. The grand jury's issuing the subpoena. She's going to be in court. I guess now she's going to see how it feels to be on the other side. I should point out it comes with a 30-year penalty. 30 years in prison, by the way. 18 U.S.C. 1014, false statements to obtain a federally insured loan. 18 U.S.C. 1001, false statements to the government. That is what Letitia James is up against as she gets madder and madder and madder at all the cops for daring to work with the Trump administration or with ICE. And this is once again why Donald Trump is saying, I've had it. You know what? I'm done with y'all. Guess what? I am President of the United States. Congress and the executive branch are working aggressively overtime to enforce the federal law of the land. So if you don't agree with it, change the law. In the meantime, we will enforce the law. That's what I was elected to do. Tishy baby, sorry, right? Sorry. Hey, guys, did you see that YouTube is like totally killing mainstream media? Yeah. It's one of the great things about being over here. I mean, I've kind of noticed it. We just started doing this show, I want to say maybe a couple of years ago. And then it became more regular, maybe about a year and a half ago. And we've been all meeting here live every single day. It's really terrific. I am thrilled to announce, who knows how long this will last because they come out with the new podcast list every week. But we are still, ladies and gentlemen, on the Top 100. Top 100, not bad, right? Top 100 podcasts in America. I kind of like the sound of that. I bet you do too. Thank you for all you've done to help get us there.